So here's the quick and dirty on seed starting. First of all, you're going to want to think about your seeding schedule. So when you buy what seeds you want to plant, you should read the instructions very carefully. It will tell you when to seed. Generally, it'll tell you how many weeks before the last frost date. Our last frost date is assumed to be about May 15th, or we like to say a long weekend. So if it says 8 weeks before our estimated last frost date, that would be 8 weeks before May long. So that's how you will plan your seeding schedule. Go through your seeds and lay that out for yourself. So rate your seeding schedule, and then when it's time to plant, the back of these packets are really important. It will tell you how deep to plant your seeds. So I actually just use this chopstick here because I do enough seeding. But this would be a 1-inch depth and 1/2 inch depth, or a 1/4 of an inch depth. In some cases, you're just going to be seeding right on top and sprinkling some soil over top of that. And so that's what they'll call very shallow seeding or surface seeding. So make sure you are planting at the proper depth, and make sure you label. Now I label using craft sticks, not the store's popsicle sticks. Popsicle sticks are glazed, and the Sharpie won't stay on it. And for some reason, my seeds never germinate in the container that the popsicle sticks are on. So I just use more of the craft sticks, and then I label. So I'm doing tomatoes and some peppers because they need to be seeded at the same time. And I actually am getting a heat mat to grow underneath these, or to provide that extra heat for the soil to help the germination. And I'll talk about that as well. So talking about containers and supplies, these are seeding trays. You can get them in different dimensions. There's some larger cells. There are some smaller cells like these. I'll be using these for my marigolds because I plant marigolds and nasturtiums all over the garden, as they are the best companion plants for the majority of our vegetables. So there's different types of cell packs. There's these cell packs as well that are plastic. There's ones made out of coconut core. There's even ones made out of peat. So there's a variety of options of containers. The one thing to remember is you need to have adequate drainage. So I will transplant my tomatoes or squash in large yogurt containers once they are a substantial size. But before that, you want to stick with the smaller sizes. The reason you want to stick with the smaller size when seeding is that otherwise, as you water, that moisture dissipates, or it moves through the soil system and not nourishing the seed that actually needs it. So talking about the nourishment of the seed, seeds do not need fertilizer. And this is why they call for soilless seed mixes for a number of reasons. But a seed has everything it needs within it to grow. The only thing that it needs to cue it to grow is moisture and warmth. When we provide moisture and warmth, the seed says, oh, it's go time, and it will start to break through and send out its root and shoot. That is, as it germinates, when you see the green come out of the soil, that is germination. Once you have your second leaves grown, that's when this plant is going to start needing nourishment. So you either provide feeding to it, you either feed it with an organic fertilizer. I highly recommend something like a fish fertilizer or anything from aquaculture. But generally, I don't even fertilize. What I then do is I transplant it into a rich soil mix. The soil mix, I recommend sea soil, and this is the Sea Soil Complete. It's excellent for potting because it actually has a coconut core already in it, which keeps it nice and loose and provides that added water holding capacity and nutrients. This is excellent for transplanting into. But for general seed starting, calls for a soilless mixture. What that means is you need something that will allow the seed to germinate, have that moisture available, but not soaking wet. The other reason they don't want soil in your seeding mix is that you could get some pathogens. You can get something like damping off disease, which is a fungus that will then attack your seed. To tell you the truth, I actually do put a little bit of soil in my seeding mix, but to each their own. I really haven't had an issue with pathogens. If you want to make your own seeding mix, you can use peat moss, 4 parts or 3 parts peat moss, a part of perlite, and a part of vermiculite. I alternatively use coconut coir instead of peat moss. From our knowledge right now, it's much more ecologically sustainable. We're dredging peat bogs versus collecting coconut husk. So you can use coconut coir, such as peat eliminator. There's another one called Beets Peat. I use both of them. You hydrate them and it fluffs up like peat moss. The real difference between the two is peat moss actually makes your soil regime a bit more acidic, which is ideal for some plants, but not all of them. But generally coconut coir is neutral, but still provides the structure and water holding capacity peat moss does. So 4 parts peat moss or coconut coir, 1 part perlite, and perlite are those loose granules, like that, that create air pockets and air movement, water movement, and loosens up your soil. So that is your perlite. 1 part perlite and 1 part vermiculite. So the vermiculite is this kind of golden, shiny type additive, and it will actually help with your soil water holding capacity. It will expand and hold that moisture. When we talk about water holding capacity, we're talking about the soil or the medium's ability to hold moisture in its small little voids, but not in its large voids. So you still have air going through, you still have space for those roots to move. You won't get root rot that way. So there you go. That's your seeding mix. You can buy it pre-made. It's hard to find with coconut coir, so I make my own, or you make your own. Remember, 4 parts coconut coir or peat moss to 1 part vermiculite, 1 part perlite. It's kind of like cooking, yeah. But that's generally 4, 1, and 1. Go with that. From your seeding mix, you then want to think about light. So you can see my south window illuminating my Norfolk pine. That light, you want intense light. You can seed start from an east or west window, but the longer amount of daylight that you have, like in a south window, the better the germination will be. It might cue those seeds to start and germinate, but once those second leaves come out, if you don't have a minimum of 12 hours of light, they will start stretching and getting weak, and that's when you see the issues with weak plants, stretched plants, and ones that just peter right out. You can also buy lights, whether you get the actual grow lights kits that are set up specifically for seeding, or you make your own out of shop lights that you have. If you are adding lights, you would always want to be about 3-4 inches above wherever your leaves are. And that will help the plants not stretch and actually become a bit stronger, more resilient, and have more girth to the stalk. So light is very important. Good soil, good moisture, and good light. Now with that as well, behind my couch there, I have a beautiful shelving unit. That's where I keep all of my seedlings going. It's drafty in the evenings because it's a bay window. The floor is very cold. It's drafty in the evenings, and there's poor air circulation back there. There's two issues with that. When you have cold, wet soil, you can rot your seeds. You can create fungus or damping off. And your seeds that love heat, your warm crops like your tomatoes and eggplants and peppers, think of the Mediterranean, they won't even germinate. So if it's cold and drafty, you can do as I do, which is move all my trays every night, or as I'm planning to do this week, buy some heat mats. So those heat mats, I plan to keep on a lower temperature and have them on in the evenings because it gets very hot in my bay window facing south all day, but in the evening it's very cold. So those heat mats will provide a little bit of heat in the evenings to help with that, keeping the soil slightly warm. And it's really those warm crops I'm most concerned about, but my cool species crops like spinach and lettuce and chards and turnips, I'm not as worried about. Yeah, so air circulation, again, same thing. You want that air circulation to combat the growth of fungus, but also it improves the resiliency of your plants. Sometimes you'll actually find your tomatoes really weak and spindly, not just because of light, because they haven't had to stand up to wind. When you have air circulation with your tomatoes, it makes the stalk stronger. So if you don't have that air circulation as they grow, they won't need to build up that rigidity in the stalk. And when you go to harden them off before you plant them outdoors, they might not be able to harden off well enough. So if you can ensure that you have good air circulation with an oscillating fan, you're going to have more resilient plants. And you see that a lot with your tomatoes. So, review. You want to have your sowing schedule figured out. And if it says 8 weeks and you plant it at 6 weeks, see how it goes. You can keep it in the house for an extra 2 weeks. If the weather's amazing, hey, sweet, go time, let's go outside. But figure out your seeding schedule. Remember to read those packets. They will tell you if it wants warm soil or not. If not, do a tray of ones that don't need a heating mat. And it'll tell you about that planting depth. Make sure you label everything so you know what you're growing. Get that soilless seed mix, or if you want to live on the edge like I do, I add a little bit of good soil to it, and then transplant into a fertile soil, unless your packet says otherwise. Lots of light, moisture. So again, it'll tell you on your packet how much moisture your seeds will, if there's an extreme, it will let you know. But I will ensure that it's not too wet. I will often water the soil with a spray bottle. And you're just misting the top pretty well because you want it to get down to the lower seeds. You want that moisture to get to the seeds. So you might have to mist quite a bit for it to get down there. If you water and that water is sitting at the bottom and it's cold at night, you're gonna have cold water in that soil and it's not gonna thrive. So misting is fantastic until you get those leaves up. When the leaves are up, you can still mist. You just wanna make sure you have that air circulation so the water doesn't stay on the leaves. You even try to mist underneath leaves. If you decide to use a watering can or I recommend one with a smaller nozzle that you can still get to the soil without wetting the leaves. Another important part to the moisture before they germinate is a cover. This is a shallow one. It's great for when we want that humidity in there. We're very dry in our climate, so this will keep the moisture in there. It acts like a mini greenhouse. It increases the heat, which we want for germination, and it keeps the moisture inside, which is great because it's not just evaporating into our desiccated homes in central Alberta. So You can see you want to make sure that your labels aren't too tall. I actually break off my sticks about an inch or so before I put them in. Otherwise, the lid won't close all the way. If you have germination, you can prop up your lids. So you're still increasing the heat. You're still keeping some humidity in there. You just don't want those leaves to touch the plastic, because then again, you're gonna produce some fungus. You can also get taller covers, such as this one. Much taller. Love these. These ones actually have vents. Whoop. What? Yeah, it's a vent. Oh no, it's pretty awesome, right? So this can go over top. As your plants get taller, you can still create little greenhouses for them. Now, a good part about venting is if you have a lot of moisture in there and a lot of leaves, and again, you're worried about fungal development on the leaves, have them vented. If it doesn't have its natural vents, have it propped up. Okay. Feeding, we talked about the feeding. Again, you don't need to feed or provide a nutrient-rich soil until after they've germinated and you've got some leaf development going. And yeah, we repot. If it's not warm enough outside yet or they're not very big, we repot into the next size cell up. You can pot it into this. I have ones that are larger. And hardening off. Now the reason we harden off is they are growing in our climate controlled environment. We can provide heat. There might be some cool periods. There might be some poor air circulation. We might get the oscillating fan. But the reality is these plants haven't had to experience cold winds and drying suns. And so they actually haven't built up their natural cuticle that helps protect the leaf. So plants outdoors, as they grow, they produce a cuticle, almost like a waxy cover that protects their leaves and their stems. So what we're doing is, as we're hardening them off, we're actually training them to build up that cuticle. Now, when you harden off, don't just go put them outside on the hottest part of your south exposure or west exposure. They will fry. So you want to put them out for a few hours when we're having above, say, 5 or 8, oh, that might be a little bit cool. Let's say above 8 degrees, and it shows that it will be consistent. I recommend doing this the week before May long, or if you want to be cautious, the week after May long. Put them out in a shady spot for the day, bring them back inside. The next day, and it'll take a week, the next day you put them maybe in a little bit more of a sunny spot. And then you bring them inside at night. And you repeat this 5 to 7 days. As you get closer to that 7th day, you can put them in full sun. You can put them in a spot that experiences more wind. That will help strengthen the plant. It'll help harden them off and produce that cuticle. And there you go, guys. When it comes to seeding varieties and the timing, I love West Coast seeds. Generally, they're 6 to 8 weeks. We are colder than their climate. You go on their website, they will actually give you a great seeding schedule, but I generally just plan 2 weeks earlier. So if it says 6 weeks, I go 8 weeks. And other than that, there's some seed starting for your vegetables. We'll also do some seeding of indoor lettuce, spinach, actually a few things here. I'll get my kids to do this. Some muslin, lettuce, spinach, and pak choy. We'll be seeding these up and showing you how to grow your indoor garden to start with. And there you go. If you have questions, message me, and thanks for growing with Dora. Good luck, stay isolated, wash those hands, and let's survive this together and homeschooling.